Welcome to Athletic Trainer Advisory Board meeting. I'm going to call this meeting to order, and it is at 9:32 on June the 22nd. Is that right? Of 2020. So thank you for joining us this morning. I'm going to ask Angelica to please give us to do the roll call for us. She will announce if a quorum is present. So wait for your name to be called and then unmute your mic and identify yourself as being present so that we can establish this quorum.
Presiding Officer David Weir.
I'm here.
Michael Fitch.
Present.
Mr. Gaines.
Here.
Dr. Schmidt.
Here.
And Brittany Webb.
Here.
Mr. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to recognize Mrs. Mary Winston, our advisory board attorney. It's going to present a little bit of training for this meeting since this is new for us. It's important for her to identify our meeting protocols and our best practices and go from there. So Ms. Winston, you have the floor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer Weir. This meeting is being conducted by teleconference, actually video conference. The public is watching via live stream. And we don't have public comments today, but whenever we do have public comments for our advisory board meetings, we allow them to get a special code to come in and speak publicly, verbally, or we take their comments before the meeting so the board members are aware of those comments. Again, this is live and it will be available on our YouTube channel as always. Here's some tips to make sure we have a successful meeting. Keep your microphone muted until you'd like to speak. Please put all phones on silent and turn off any other source of noise in your workspace. State your name before you begin speaking. Raise your hand if you'd like to speak. A lot of these platforms do have a hand raise feature, but while the presiding officer is running the meeting, he may not have time to search into the different icons to look for that. So what we do is we make sure our hand is visible on the video feed. The presiding officer will then call on you. If you have any problems connecting during the meeting, let the presiding officer know. We have staff working in the office. Several of us are here, including Michael Fickle, who has put us all on this great platform, who can assist with connectivity issues. Stay on camera during the meeting, even if you aren't speaking. If you need a recess, raise your hand and let the presiding officer know. Make sure your hand is visible on your camera. If you get inadvertently disconnected from the meeting, rejoin the meeting using the same link you used to join the meeting initially. This is our third video conference advisory board meeting. We know that there may be a few awkward moments or minor blips. We've had some disconnections, reconnections. We've taken some breaks. No worries. We will deal with everything in real time and take a small recess if we need to. These blips are anticipated and they are okay. We will just adjust. We'll go through all of the agenda items and take care of everything we need to act on today. Thank you everyone for your participation. Presiding Officer Weir.
Thank you, Ms. Winston. Just for a housekeeping and for all other board members to be aware of, if for some reason I fell off the face of the earth or off this screen, Brittany Webb will step in as an adjunct chair to continue to conduct the meeting so that we are productive until I can get back on or to finish that. Yes, Ms. Winston?
I forgot to add one thing. Any votes taken today, so we don't have the different video feeds coming in from all the different locations where we are today, we'll conduct them by a roll call vote. So Angelica will take a roll call vote and that will simplify the process. Unmute yourself, vote, and we'll handle from there. Thank you.
Yeah, this is David Weir. I'm moving on to agenda item D. Our last face-to-face board meeting, our last board meeting took place on December the 2nd, 2019. It's been a while, obviously due to situations outside of our control. But anyway, we do need to move forward with approval of our minutes from that meeting. Those meeting minutes were sent to you via email prior to this meeting. I hope you've had an opportunity to review those. I would like to ask Angelica to poll the board for their vote to approve the minutes, and then she will announce if the motion passes. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion from Daryl Gaines.
Red makes the motion to approve the minutes. Mr. Darrell Gaines, and then do I have a second?
I second Brittany Webb.
Brittany Webb seconds that. And so then I'm going to move to Angelica to poll the board to approve.
Presiding Officer David Weir,
Approve.
Mr. Michael Fitch,
Approve.
Mr. Darrell Gaines,
Approve.
Dr. David Schmidt,
Approved.
and Ms. Brittany Webb.
Approve.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item E, public comment. We have received 3, I think, public comments via email and so that may come up in a later item. There is no one that is announced to us that they want to call in and have any public comment this morning. So we will not be taking any of those items. I think Molly may be mentioning those public comments in her later area. Am I correct there, staff?
Yes, that's correct. I'll talk about them.
Okay, very good. So that covers item E. Item F, we are going to discuss the possible recommendation on the proposed amendments to existing rules 16 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 10, 110.21.110.23.110 and 30, and 110.70 regarding the athletic trainer program. The proposed amendments make changes to the certain licensing requirements. They clean up some areas and things like that. You were also sent these as to review as well. So I'd like to announce at this point in time Ms. Molly Fidel, Assistant General Counsel. Molly will present our public comments received regarding these proposed rules for discussion, and then we will take a motion to do that. If there's any discussion, that discussion will take place after or the second. If we do have a motion and there is a second, so please reserve time for discussion of these amendments to my call for questions. Ms. Molly Fidel.
Thank you, Chair Weir. So these proposed rules resulted from a work group, which the chair and Brittany Webb were on. And this work group was looking at ways to improve the pass rate on the Texas written exam. So some of these rules are designed to do that, and some of them are cleanup, and some of them are suggested from staff. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I will go through the rules with you. If at any time I'm going too fast, just let me know. I'll slow down. So first, can everybody see it right now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So the first proposed change was in 110.21. I'm going to scroll down to, there it is, A at the top. Human anatomy, and we're adding and human physiology to the required coursework. This is essentially catching the rules up to the current practice in colleges and universities around the state. Moving on to the next one, you'll see here it's in C, the top, and we're putting in this clarification that an affiliated setting may be any setting where athletic training takes place, and that's an affiliated setting for the apprenticeship. Then in E, we're adding in administrative management and assessment of injuries in the required apprenticeship topics. This is another instance where the rules are catching up to the current practice out in the world. Then here in paragraph 3, we're removing some language that's unnecessary and kind of redundant, and we're also adding in the clarification regarding affiliated settings. Moving on to the proposed changes to 110.23. You'll see here in 3A through F, we're adding in a list of the domains that are tested on the written exam to give people a little bit of extra notice of what might be tested. This is currently given to candidates for the test, but we wanted to provide another avenue just in case. Then we've also got the proposed changes in M and N. There was a bit of discussion about this at the last meeting, but this is the change that would remove that January 1st, 2004 date, after which an applicant would have to pass the BOC exam for those results to be accepted in lieu of the Texas exam. Moving on to 110.30, these are the changes for regarding the temporary license. We're closing a loophole that we inadvertently created, and we are also changing the language to better describe the licensing process. And then in 110.70, standards of conduct, here in Q4, 4 is right here in the middle, we're removing the prohibition on athletic trainers, including testimonials in their advertising, and that's based on guidance from the Office of the Attorney General. So that is it for these rules. They were published in the Texas Register on February 21st, and the 30-day comment period closed on March 23rd. I'm going to stop sharing so you can see me. Okay. We received 3 comments on the rules. None of them were against the rules. One comment had suggestions for other changes that might be made, so it was outside the scope of the proposed rules. So we're going to note those suggestions for possible future rulemakings. There was also a comment in support of the change regarding the BOC exam, and there were some other statements within that comment that were, again, outside the scope of the proposed rules. And the last comment we received really was not relevant to the proposed rules. I think maybe that comment was intended for a different licensing program, and it got wrapped up in ours. So we, staff, are recommending the adoption of the proposed rules as published in the Texas Register. And I'll leave it to you for discussion and a vote.
Thank you, Ms. Fidel. Do I have a motion to accept these changes as stated by Ms. Fidel?
So moved.
Mr. Gaines makes that, no, I'm sorry, Mr. Fitch. Mr. Fitch makes that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, David Schmidt.
Okay, David Smith's recognized as the second here. Do we have any questions or comments regarding this rule to discuss at this point in time? None being said, I will shift us to staff to call for a vote to approve.
Presiding Officer David Weir,
Approve?
Mr. Michael Fitch,
Approve.
Mr. Daryl Gaines,
Approve.
Dr. David Schmidt,
Approve.
and Ms. Brittany Webb.
Approved.
Motion passes.
Motion passes. Thank you very much. In the last legislative session, we're moving to item H. In the last legislative session, House Bill 2059 was proposed and passed and signed into law. This is a requirement for human trafficking prevention training that would be required, and it has been defined and interpreted as applicable to athletic trainers as well. This is something Dr. Smith may have heard from the medical side of things. This is very broad and very wide sweeping, affecting many different allied health professions. And so with that being said, it's something that we need to discuss. So I'm going to shift the dais back to Ms. Fidel to discuss this provision and how it affects athletic trainers. Ms. Fidel.
Thank you. Yes, so this bill was passed in last legislative session. It requires athletic trainers and all healthcare practitioners who provide direct patient care to take a human trafficking prevention training in order to renew their license for every renewal on or after September 1st of 2020. So HHSC, the Texas Health and Human Services Commission, approves courses and they post them on their website or post links to them. They're required to approve at least one course that's free of charge. I believe they already have one that is approved and then that's on there. It takes about an hour. So what we've done, I'm going to share my screen again. Oops, that is not it. Okay. Stop sharing. Oh gosh. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Here we go. We've drafted this proposed rule for your review. It simply implements a change to 110.24 that says for each license renewal on or after September 1, 2020, the licensee must complete the human trafficking prevention training required under Texas Occupations Code Chapter 116 and provide proof of completion as prescribed by the department. So what we're doing there is we are essentially tying that requirement for the human trafficking prevention training to the athletic training rules. I'm available for any questions that you might have. Otherwise, it's up for you for discussion and a vote.
Does anybody have any questions before I call for this? Molly, and also let me speak. Is this where we want to discuss the utilizing this hour as continuing ed? Is this appropriate?
Yeah, we can. So we have it as a separate topic.
Okay.
And we can talk about it now, or we can do it separately, however you'd like.
Okay. Well, we'll stay with it then. The second topic. Does anybody from the board have any questions regarding this training before I call for a motion?
Chairman Weir, I have something, just a statement to make, actually.
Go ahead. You have the floor, Ms. Webb.
Okay. Just in the future, because whenever this came out and it hit our membership, and our athletic trainers out in the workforce, when it hit, I did not know that this had come down through the ranks. And so what happened was my phone started blowing up because they had questions about it. Some of them were good concerns. Some of them were not so good concerns. And so in the future, if the board could just have a heads up that this is coming down, because our membership, they have our cell phone numbers. And so when they have questions, they call us. And if we're kind of blindsided by it, then we can't really answer it very well. So my suggestion would be if the board could have a heads up when something like this comes down the pipe, I definitely would greatly appreciate it because I can answer the questions a little bit easier on my side when they call.
Thank you, Ms. Webb, and I echo that. Same thing, very similar, same thing happened to me, and we had a board meeting in December, so this would have already been on the radar, and I don't feel like that we were kind of given the heads up in a good time frame to give us the heads up that this was coming and catching it off guard. I think it was solely mentioned in a bulletin put out by the ED and not given out to us directly as a board. So I echo Ms. Webb's sentiments and comments there for future reference.
Mary Winston, TDLR. We will definitely make note of that and make sure that we reach out to the board specifically to give a heads up as this has been coming down the pike. In December, things were underway. 2059 has came down after the last session, and this requirement has been figured out along this way, along with everything else. But we will definitely, I'll make sure that we have that contact with you directly, aside from a general newsletter or email.
Thank you so much. We would appreciate that. Okay, any other questions or comments before I call for a motion? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion to accept this adoption and change to our rules?
Chairman Weir, I got a question.
Yes, hold on a second. I'll back up that motion call. Mr. Gaines, you have the floor.
2 questions. One, and Miss Molly, I'm sure it's directed your direction. First off, is this like this is similar to the requirements that we have for concussion training? Uh, that this is going to be required each renewal to do. Is it? And my second question is this just 1 hour per renewal, or are we doing 2 hours, or for example, once a year, such as like the concussion is 2 hours, can be done either once a year or 2 hour session within that renewal period?
Sure. So it is like the concussion management or CPR in that you have to do it for each renewal, but it's different in that there is no requirement as to the number of hours that it has to take for the training. So you would just go on the HHSC website, pick out one of the trainings that's been approved. You can pick whichever one you want and complete one of them of your choosing.
Okay. I mean, I've already done that, and that's why I was asking if I'm gonna be required to do another one next year, or if that training that I've done and recorded and printed off my certificate will be acceptable for this renewal period that we're in currently. And I mean, it was on the website, so I know it'll cover for it, but I just wanted to ask.
Yes, you'll have to do one for each renewal period. So the one that you took already should be fine for your next renewal.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions before I call for a motion? Do I have a motion to adopt?
Daryl Gaines, motion
Yes.
to adopt.
Mr. Gaines makes the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
David Schmidt, second.
Dr. Schmidt is the second on that. Any calls for questions or comments before I call for a vote? Hearing none, board staff, will you call for the to poll our members?
Yes. Presiding Officer David Weir,
Approve?
Mr. Michael Fitch,
Approve.
Mr. Daryl Gaines,
Approve.
Dr. David Schmidt,
Approve.
and Ms. Brittany Webb.
Approved.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Let me, if I could, I do have one question. I should have asked it an item agenda ago, back to Ms. Goodell. In regards to the previous adoption vote that we did with the other rules, Ms. Goodell, would you kind of give us a time frame in regards to adoption? I know these will go to the commission for them to ultimately approve and then post. But in regards to that, I know it being summertime, there may be some potential people out there that are going to be looking to coming into our state that may fall, that may the 2004 leaving our rules may affect. Could you give us a brief timeline as to the adoption of this, and if a person were to come in and be looking to say start a job in August, and how they need to apply? Because now, or if the commission adopts this rule change, they would not have to sit for the license exam now. They would just merely apply, come in under the BOC exam waiver process. So could you give us a heads up, a little bit of a rundown on that? Thank you.
Sure. So the commission is going to consider these rules for adoption at their next meeting, which is on June 30th. And I believe staff is going to recommend an effective date of August 1st on that rule. So at that point, the rule will be effective and the BOC exam would be accepted for before 2004, assuming that the commission adopts those rules.
Okay. So would an individual need to wait to literally file their application until August 1st? Or how is that going to be considered? And I open that to any other staff that processes applications. How would this apply to them?
Well, so if somebody submitted their application before August 1st and it were processed before August 1st, it would have to be processed in accordance with the rules as they exist at that time. After August 1st, we could start granting the exam waiver. However, somebody could possibly see if the temporary license, um, if that fits their situation and if they're eligible for that, that might be an option for them as well. But I would suggest that people get their applications in as soon as possible on or after August 1st. And the rules, whether when they're adopted, they're published in the Texas Register. And so if somebody is subscribed to our newsletter, the Athletic Trainers newsletter, you can go on the TDLR website and subscribe to that. That gives people notice of the rules that are adopted that are affecting the Athletic Trainers program. And that's another way to get news about what's adopted and what's not adopted. I'd also advise anybody who is watching this right now who thinks that this might apply to them, go ahead and set yourself a reminder on your calendar, however you need to do it, and get your application in as soon as possible on or after August 1st.
Okay, Ms. Fuda, I'm just going to ask this. Is there any possible, because of the hiring times and just the normal cyclical time frame of people starting new jobs in the world of athletic training, and that being the fall, is there any possible way that that could get backed up to say July 15th to make it a little bit more applicable? Because really, in our world, August 1st, the world starts over again. And so in those types of situations, I don't know what's feasible and what's legal. So is that a possibility?
So July 15th would not be a possibility simply because after the rules are voted on by the commission, then when we file them in the Texas Register, it has to be at least 20 days. The effective date has to be at least 20 days out there. But I can talk with staff about seeing if maybe we could back it up a little bit.
Okay, that would be greatly appreciated. And then kind of probably a staff bulletin to know that they might be getting these and to handle them in an efficient, proficient way of dealing with that. I would appreciate, because I mean, I don't want to, if that barrier now is being removed, I don't want it to inappropriately apply to someone. If we can prevent that. So I appreciate your willingness and flexibility to look at that. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to item I. I apologize for having to go back to that. I meant to have that discussion earlier. So now I'd like to recognize our Deputy Executive Director, Mr. Mike Ayers-Mendez, who will present the executive staff report. Mr. Ayers-Mendez, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman Ware. I believe that Mr. Gaines raised his hand, so he may have a question. I don't know if it's concerning my salmon colored shirt or what, but.
I apologize. Mr. Gaines, did you have a comment or question?
Well, I think you skipped a line item, Mr. Weir. I think we need to discuss H first.
Okay, hold on.
That would be in reference to the work group, I believe, Chairman Ware.
Okay, my H is the human trafficking prevention training.
Talking about making that a continuing education credit.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
My apologies. My apologies. Okay. So thank you very much. I'm glad I've got great people to keep me in order because I need help. So in regards to this human trafficking training, it is a discussion of ours that we need to determine as a board if we're going to allow our members to count this in their required continuing education. When this law came down from the legislature, it was mandated that doctors and nurses be allowed to, but Health and Human Services has pushed out to say that individual boards can make that determination for their respective members. And so it needs to be our discussion. And so what we can do is I'll go ahead and call for a motion to accept that and allow our members to count that within their normal continuing education requirements. And then we can call for question and discussion in regards to that during that portion. So do I have a motion for that?
Brittany Webb motions.
Ms. Webb makes that motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Fitch is recognized as the second on the motion. So I'm going to call for question and comments at this particular time. Any question or comments in regards to this motion?
Daryl Gaines, I have three.
Go ahead, sir. You have the floor.
The first question is, I mean, and I guess I need some clarification on what we motioned, because the statement here states that the possible assignment of a work group to study whether we want to do this or not. Is this a motion to go ahead and make this a continuing education credit, or are we motioning to create a work group? That's question number one.
Okay, Brittany Webb, can I answer that?
Sure.
My motion was to go ahead and use that as a continuing ed, not a work group.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Webb. So in this discussion here, Mr. Gaines, let's go through and kind of feel out the group. If we feel that there needs to be a work group and there's discussion or there is concern that we need to further discuss this, then we will not pass the motion and we will refer it to a work group for further study. If it's felt that the group is fine with moving forward with adoption, then we would go ahead and approve the motion and then abandon the work group meeting. So I open the group up for comments and discussion.
Well, I'm good for going ahead and.
Mr. Gaines, go ahead. You have two
I'm
more.
sorry. I apologize. Daryl Gaines, I'm all for going ahead and not doing a work group. I was just wanting to make sure that we were clear on that because of the way it was worded in the agenda, to make sure that that was how we were proposing, or the motion was made, so that everybody was on the same page. And I may be stepping out of line, but that's just my small mental capacity keeps me in line on that.
No, and I just, it's always, when you get on these types of things, I just encourage everybody when they make a motion to make it clearly as to what the motion is, so that everybody's clear. So that's a good catch, Mr. Gaines. I appreciate that. Ms. Webb did clarify that motion, and I will say, I had mixed emotions originally when this came down, but when I read that in the law that the doctors and the nurses was mandated within the law, I would have a hard time looking at one of our members and saying why we wouldn't count that for them to being consistent in the allied health field. So that was my thought there. So Ms. Fudel, I see your hands raised. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. The way that we phrase this agenda item, it actually doesn't require a vote unless you're going to send it to a work group. What we can do is take your discussion and go ahead and craft some rules around it to require the course count as CE. So your discussion is sufficient. Thank you.
Okay, so I will not need to, after the discussion, I will not need to call for the vote. Is that correct, Ms. Fudel?
That's
Okay.
correct.
All right, Mr. Gaines, you have the floor.
My second question is, are we going to be specific on the types of training that this involves? My reasoning is, in the secondary setting at least, our human resources training requires us to, part of our human resources that I'm required to go through every year from my employer has human trafficking touch on, and our training that we're required to complete. And I guarantee you, I'm already receiving questions about that, and wanted to put that out there for the board and staff, because that's going to need to be clarified how that plays out, whether, like the training that I did off of the email that I received from TDLR, that was through the AMA's creation of that, and that's where the AMA gave one contact our CEU, but I think that was, and I haven't looked at it specifically, but the training that I did even last August through my school district may or may not have been at least an hour. And so if we're going to make this a continuing ed, which I'm, we'll discuss that. I'm all for it. Then we might need to be specific about where that comes from. If the, what we call safe schools training, is acceptable for the secondary school trainer, athletic trainer, excuse me, then they're already getting that through that. Will that suffice, or will they need to do outside training, such as what was presented to us in the email from TDLR? And I release the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Gaines. And that's a great question. And I think many of us, I also go through similar like training at my institution. And I see Ms. Webb, she's shaking her head. And so I referred that back to staff as who is going to be the keeper of the gate. I would use that term, keeper of the gate, in regards to this training to make sure that our members are in compliance.
And so I can answer that one for you. HB 2059, in order to be compliant with that, it requires the human trafficking prevention training that's been approved by HHSC. So it would have to be one that they've approved. I suppose that one that you have to do, just work could be something that's been approved by HHSC, but maybe not. So what we would be doing is for the CEs, we would say that the HHSC approved human trafficking prevention training would count as CEs. And just like all other CEs, licensees would be responsible for maintaining that certificate of completion. So it may or may not be something that you would do just for your employment.
Okay. So an individual would need to submit a transcript or submit a course objectives, a course description that they took through their institution. They would need to submit that directly to Health and Human Services for their approval. Am I correct?
Right. So an HHSC on their website has a link for getting approval for the training to count as HHSC approved human trafficking prevention training. However, I can't be certain, but I believe that once you get that approval, they require you to make that available to everybody else. So I'm not exactly sure how that would work with other trainings.
Okay.
So,
Go ahead, Ms. Webb, you have the floor.
so Molly, I have a question. This is Brittany Webb. So what you're saying is it's just better to go to the website that has already been approved and use those only.
Correct.
Okay. Any other question or comments in regards to that?
Yes.
Go ahead, Ms. Webb, you have the floor.
So just to put it out there, I have talked to a number of athletic trainers, and their take on this was that if we're going to have to do it, to please let it count for CEs. And so that would be my recommendation on all of the membership that has contacted me.
Okay. I'm also in favor of counting it as CEs as well. Mr. Gaines?
Excuse me, I have to unmute. Yeah, I'm all for counting it as continuing it. If we're going to be required to do it, then let's make it beneficial to our membership, or our fellow licensees to gain something from it, so that the incentive is there to be active in taking care of business.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fitch, could I get a comment on the record in regards to your thoughts?
Yeah, I support the fact that it be counted as continuing education and just agree with Ms. Webb and Mr. Gaines.
Dr. Smith, would you put a comment on the record as well, please?
I agree with the motion.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Fudel, staff, is that accurate or adequate comments from us in regards to moving forward with that approval?
Yes, it is. Thank you. We'll get to work on that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now I'll move to item I, being I didn't handle H correctly. Mr. Ayers-Mendez, you have the floor to give us the executive staff report.
Thank you, Chairman Ware. Thank you, board members, for your time. I think that it's pretty evident by being on this particular call, the way we're doing this call, that times are different. Times have changed. Now with the onset of having video conferencing due to the coronavirus, it's been the same with us. It's affected our world and how we conduct business. Um, as you know, back in March, there was an executive order by Governor Abbott that began to start looking at and affecting our licensees directly by shutting down businesses, closing them down in order to be able to contain the spread of COVID. Well, I want to kind of take you through a little bit of what we did on our end and how we tackled this problem and how we tackled this issue. This is one right here, as you can see, with video conferencing. But I want you to be aware that safety was our priority when we again start taking a look at this whole issue and the situation that we found ourselves in. And we took it from two approaches. One of them was how we conducted business internally with our staff and our business model. And the second one was out how we dealt with licensees. First of all, I want to tell you a little bit about how we dealt with it internally. And when the governor issued an executive order and state agencies began to start sending employees home to work from home, we did the same thing. Approximately mid-March, I believe it was around March 12th, I believe, we sent employees home and began the process of trying to figure out how we can continue to conduct our state business and be there for the licensees that we license and regulate while still following the social distancing, following the protocol set forth by the CDC. I can tell you that we've got Stuart Myrick on here who was, he was our plug-in to the State Operations Center. He is the individual that was able to provide us all the information that we needed. He, along with Steve Euchre, continue to give us updates, and to this day, we still get updates from Stuart on what's going on throughout the state of Texas with the Texas Department of Emergency Management. So I want to publicly thank Stuart and Steve for the work that they've done for this agency and for the state of Texas and the licensees. I can tell you that Stuart has been on this thing from day one. We finally gave him a couple of breaks. I think he just came off of a break last weekend. So he's been on it. I mean, from day one. I mean, it's been kind of a 24/7 thing for him. So we did that. We limited the staff that was located in the offices, in our downtown office and also our North Campus where we meet. So when you go right now, you'll find very few employees at our offices. We're running about 92, 93% work from home. And we are now beginning the process of talking about what does that look like returning back to the office. And we do make note here at TDLR that it's not return to work because they have been working. They have continued to do the work for licensees. They've continued to do the work for the state of Texas. In some instances, they have told me that they find themselves to be much more productive. I can tell you for myself, I'm ready to get back to the office. But we're not at that point yet. So we're slowly beginning to start having that discussion about what it looks like to return back to the office, how we can begin to continue to expand our inspections. We stopped inspections the moment that this occurred. And so we began to not do any type of inspections. Our inspectors were now confined to their location, wherever they were at. And they begin the process of doing other things such as learning, reading the rules, assisting in other areas within our agency. So they began to start chipping in, helping out to make sure that we were continuing to do the work that we needed to. We stopped all non-essential travel, which I think is a part of what Stuart was talking about earlier, in that the conferences that we would normally go to during the summertime for all of our licensees and their organizations, that's been stopped. So we're no longer attending, we basically have stopped all non-essential travel. The public meetings, such as you see right here, have now moved to video conferencing. Our commission meetings have moved to video conferencing. So we've have now resorted to a new way of life, a new, what we're basically consider a new norm. So we're trying to find our ways. You can see, I don't know if anybody noticed that I got bumped out of this meeting earlier and had to get permission from Michael Fickle to get back on. And so these things happen. We run into these little glitches that we're having to kind of work our way through, but we're seem to be getting there, and we're slowly getting to where we need to be. Now, what were we doing outside to our licensees? We continue to try to provide all the information that we could. I can tell you that our social media presence has increased dramatically. The followers that we had on social media has increased because we are now putting all the information that we can out on our website. And for the athletic trainer licensees, the association, see what we're providing to them. Yes, Chairman Ware.
You just lost, I lost your audio there for about 5 seconds.
Okay, I'm sorry. Am I back?
Yes, you're back now.
Okay. Therein lies the issue that I was discussing earlier. I'm not sure what part I missed, so I'll go back. We continue to provide the information to our licensee base. So I would ask everyone from the athletic training community that if you haven't signed up or gone out to our website, go out and take a look. All the information that we have, everything that we've been doing since COVID has occurred is a running list of what all we've been doing. We have we sought approval from the governor to provide relief to some of our licensees, and that would include the ability to continue to work under some confined settings, some guidelines that we're able to provide. I give you an example, on March the 17th, we requested waiving all C requirements for licensees through March, April, May, and now it's all the way through June. We extended our elimination of architectural barriers building inspection deadlines by 60 days. So inspections that were due in March or April and May and now through June have been extended. Inspection times for boilers and elevators coming due that were March, April, May, now in June. All of those we requested waivers, and it was approved on March the 23rd. So we continue to have this happen. We did some other things in our motor fuels program, as you know, I mentioned earlier in one of our previous meetings that we're now licensing and regulating motor fuels. We had some things in there that we had to end up asking requests for winter fuel, as an example, and that was approved also on March the 23rd. We've requested waiver for statute and rule provisions for health professions, including telemedicine and telehealth. So all these things we began to start doing. I can tell you the latest what we did on April the 21st was that we requested a waiver for late renewal fees for licensees that occurred and was taking place between mid-March and mid-June. And so we've outwardly gone out and tried to protect our licensees to the best that we can, and requesting waivers from the governor's office. We have received some. We're still waiting on some of the other ones. But they've been very responsive to us, have been very engaged with us on how we can continue to protect our licensee base. As you also know, through some of the governor's orders, that they had some reopenings that took place. On May the 8th, barbers and cosmetologists, through an executive order, were allowed to reopen. On May the 18th, we had massage and other things that began to start reopening. So we began to start doing this, and now we're starting the process of reopening. So we had two phases. One was the closing, and the second one was the reopening. And that also required some discussion with our licensee base and to ensure that there was proper guidelines and protocols put in place. So we worked through that. As an example, PSI, or written exams, they reopened on May the 22nd, but they're at a reduced capacity. So we're working with PSI also on how we can begin to start expanding the exams for our licensee base to ensure that they continue to get through this bottleneck that's going on and it's happening. So it's been a very detailed process for us. It's been it's been an intense process. I can tell you that our leadership team meets. When we first started this process, we were meeting daily, and then we moved to twice a week. We're now once a week, and it's still a matter of ensuring that our licensees continue to have and are provided the information that they need. I'm available to answer any questions concerning that. Yes, Chairman Weir, I believe you got a question for me.
Yes, thank you. And that's why I wanted to make a couple of comments before you went on to your next agenda item on strategic planning. Do you anticipate any other continuing ed unit extension to occur, or do you feel like that's going to pretty well stop at the end of June?
I can tell you that a lot of it, we're in flux right now. I think that one of the things that we have found here is that we're learning each day as we go. It's, as you can see, according to the news, the uptick in some cases. The governor has a press conference today at 2:00, and so we'll see what he says. If this trend, we could see that, it may end, but if there's a change in the governor's position concerning the reopening of Texas, or concerns about the number of cases being increased, then you may see a change on how we approach that in the future. So all of that to say, Chairman, we don't know. We're just still kind of going each day, learning as we're going to find out what's going on. It seems like every day brings a new challenge for us that we're having to tackle and take on.
Okay, well, thank you. And I will, and you probably have this information, but our national meeting, the NATA meeting, is virtual. It will actually be taking place here in a few weeks, I think the third week of July, as well as the SWATA, which is our district meeting, has also now been going virtual, and it will be taking place. There's a broad window starting early August in regards to that. So, we're certainly in the athletic trainer world, and those meetings are probably where the many of our members get continuing education face to face. And I know many of them will be utilizing going more virtual, but there's going to be some of those members that just feel like that they don't want to go through the virtual route. They don't feel like they learn as well. Don't just choose to do that. So I just put that out there for consideration for from TDLR. And in regards to a couple things, I would say I want to recognize publicly the athletic trainers. There's been many athletic trainers that have stepped out of their normal job roles as delivering athletic training, healthcare. In many cases, that work in the clinical settings, work for hospitals, that have stepped up and taken on different roles in this response, and whether it doing screenings at the door or helping on the floor, doing different things that they were trained to do. And so I want to publicly recognize and thank them for their individual responses. There's many of them that didn't just go home just because they weren't seeing athletes. They stepped up and started taking care of the general population as they were processed through the ERs or through the hospital system. So I want to recognize them as well. I'd also like to recognize TDLRs, and I would say there was another issue that I did want to bring up this morning. I've heard very few to little or no customer service complaints during this time. That people are being taken care of, or at least if they're not telling me. I had more complaints prior to COVID-19, and I think that was just more or less that you guys taking on a lot of new different boards and different allied health settings, and we were hearing a lot of things of long hold times, long wait times, and things like that from customer service, and some cases not getting phone calls back, and so on and so forth. So I wanted to bring that to this meeting, but also compliment, say, even the changes that you've made and adapting to this COVID-19 response through this point in time. You guys have handled the customer service calls, to my knowledge. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And I'm sure that our customer service employees, staff would be either listening to this meeting or we'll be able to go back and do it. But we'll make sure that they're aware of that. And yes, you're right. They have really been taking it and running with it and being responsive to providing information to that and answering those calls. And you're right concerning the athletic trainers. I think that they, along with others, have stepped up during this time and provided some medical professional help, such as you mentioned, working at hospitals or providing other medically related help in various other areas that needed to be done. So you're right. I'm glad that you brought it up here and put it in this meeting, but they need to be applauded for the work that they put out there. I think Mr. Gaines has a comment.
Just a clarification question, maybe. I've had several phone calls concerning students graduating and coming out that were needing to take the exams in order to receive licensure that will not be under the BOC opportunity. And my question is, how thought out have we gone through with being able to, assuming they can sit down in front of a computer and take the written examination, what are we looking at with the practical exam that enables them to complete their licensure requirements and become licensed?
Ms. Webb, I saw your hand up. You want to respond to that before I let staff respond?
Yes, we have a practical that is going to be on the 12th of July. That will be happening in several sites around the state. So those who need to take the practical will be able to do that.
Ms. Webb, what are those sites? Can you give us that?
It's Fort Worth, San Antonio. Thank you, Dr. Schmidt. And then Houston. The one at Texas Tech, I don't believe is on the list because Texas Tech has their own rules up there due to the COVID-19. So they're not allowing people on campus is what the last thing that I heard. Somebody else on here may want to chime in on that one, but those are the sites.
Okay, thank you. Anybody from staff like to address Mr. Gaines's question and comments as well?
I'll start off, and Stuart may be able to come in also. I'm not aware, but Mr. Gaines, yeah, I mean that's a great question. I think that Ms. Webb was able to provide a little bit of information on that about the practical being done. Stuart, are you familiar with anything?
I am not. I know that along with all the different other restrictions, we also have to look at cities and counties. For instance, Austin and Travis County are still under a work at home, stay home order through mid August right now, which is going to affect a lot of things, including things like us returning to the office. So, but I have not been apprised of anything as far as the exams go. I've been, as Mike mentioned, I've been pretty focused on what's happening in the state operations center, assisting in the state's response to COVID-19, which has been eye-opening to say the least. So I would echo Red's comments. I've been seeing the stories about athletic trainers stepping into different first responder roles, whether it's emergency rooms, testing sites. The state has been getting more and more testing sites open. They've got a task force with Texas military forces. They've been teaming up to try to get as much of the state covered as possible, especially hotspots. And I believe, in fact, Brittany, you mentioned Texas Tech. I believe Lubbock was one of those hotspots last month. So I know they've been really focused on getting testing done in the Lubbock area. So that might be part of what's affecting Texas Tech's ability to host an exam.
Another thing that I want to, basically put out for discussion is that, we had student athletic trainers that were in the process of getting hours this spring within their respective athletic training rooms. So obviously those had to stop while their academic endeavors, in most cases, were able to continue on with online courses and virtual learning. And so, I think it's got to be on the radar as far as with staff and our board is how can we respond legally? I know we cannot change the law and the requirements and things, but how can we also be understanding and work through situations of individuals who had planned on, finishing up their hours this spring, and or what is the potential for the fall? And if we were to have a closure in the fall, what options are there for students to be able to continue to meet the hour requirements that we have in our apprenticeship programs while their academics are able to go on? How can we respond to that? I think that's got to be on our radar. It has to be in our discussion dialogue as to how to address these individuals, because in many cases where our laws and rules are holding them from going out and being gainfully employed potentially. So I put that out there for discussion.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the issues that we're running into in this. I think Mary's got a comment.
I'm waving everybody down.
I'm sorry. Okay.
No problem. Mr. Weir, everyone, board members, that is Mary Winston. That is something that TDLR has looked into from I don't want to say all of, but most all of our programs that require continuing education. Certain things are wrapped up in laws and rules that we can't change. However, as this is a fluid process, and as Mike says, things are changing every day, there are requests that we have made for exceptions during this time. So we've made these requests to the governor's office. We've been granted these requests. This is something, please contact us, and we'll be working in the background, Molly and our government relations folks, as to what we need to look at about students and continuing education and things being held up at this time. Um, this board has been more quiet than most. And Mr. Ware, like you said, there have been fewer complaints about customer service, and thank you for those kudos. But that is something that we will definitely take in consideration. Thank you for putting that out into the atmosphere. And we will take a deeper dive look into that, as we have with all of our other programs that this quarantine has highlighted. As Stuart says, and bless his heart, he's had a front row seat in emergency management. I think it's been an eye-opening front row seat. So he is definitely an asset as we move forward in making these decisions. But you've given us another project to work on. Thank you. Or to add to our ongoing project of how to take care of our licensees, Mr. Ware. Thank you. And I do see red hands up, so I'm going to yield the floor.
Mr. Gaines,
I could unmute. I guess that's where I was going to, and I, like Mr. Weir brought up, students that were unable to gain hours due to the fluid situation and what will happen in the future. But my question is, what is Plan B if we should have students or former students, graduates that are planning on examination that are unable to do so, and coming up in the fall where they were planning to, assuming they pass their examination, be licensed and able to be gainfully employed? What about those students? What about those individuals? Have we got a reserve plan just in case we're not able to, for example, do the practical on the 12th of July? What happens to those individuals? Is there a temporary licensure, or, I mean, and I'm just throwing that out there. I just think that needs to be addressed, or at least looked at, or at least giving a fair warning, because, I can imagine if I were in that position, I planned on taking the examination in May, June, and, I'm fixing to be out, looking for a job. I'm looking for a job currently, and I can't take the job because I can't get licensed because I can't take the examination.
Right.
So, and I put that out there. I'm sure y'all thought of it. I just would like to get that on record.
I recognize Ms. Winston. Go ahead.
Red, Mr. Weir and board, thank you again. You all are bringing up, I'm just going to say this, work groups prepare to be called, because this is something that is ongoing as we go, just moment to moment, as Mike said. And this is something that we do want to pull board members, not the full board. We know quorum issues, but in the different work groups to kind of come up. And we want to also hear from your different conferences, the input of, like, apparently, and which is great, your membership calls you. Call us and give us those ideas. And because we want to take into consideration everything, and we will be contacting work groups kind of ASAP, because as these things develop, we were in stage 1, in stage 2, we may be moving backwards, not sure, we'll get more notification on that. More hotspots have been identified. So it's a fluid thing, but in the movement of how everything is going, that's well beyond our control, we will be getting input from all of you before proceeding to request any special dispensations that we have to. So all of these things are wonderful, and I appreciate the consideration. And I know that you all are available and willing to participate, to give us those ideas. And you can always shoot those ideas to us individually. get a lot of emails and personal phone calls, well, work still phone calls from other board members with suggestions. So please feel free to do that, but we will be contacting the work group. I'm going to yield the floor again. Mr. Chairman, I see that Stuart has his hand up.
Yeah, one comment, one question. Comment, temporary licensure is available, and they can certainly apply. I know it's an additional fee, but at least it allows them to work until they're able to take an exam. And as long as they haven't failed the exam, they can certainly get it. The question, talking about apprenticeship hours, have we heard anything about how the BOC is handling this situation? Because even accredited programs, they have some sort of, they have to do some hours in a training room. How are they handling this?
Well, those specific things through BOC all work through the accredited program, and so those are being addressed through those program directors. There is not an hours requirement as far as for the
Like a
KU
number?
programs. It's course based, and so there are students that have incompletes in regards to those things. But with our apprenticeship, you have really two different entities. You have the athletic trainer that's down in the athletic training room that is approving hours, and then you have the coursework that is required that's coming in on transcript. So there's a lot of moving parts and restrictions. I mean, even to the fact of in our rules that say you have to be enrolled in the university to get your hours. Well, if you are finished with your coursework, there's another turn that's within our rules and things like that. So yeah, I think we have to, and as Red said, we've got to get Plan B and get Plan B really active on the back burner so that we are ready to respond. So if that's a work group, then I say let's get that rolling or whatever we need to do. We need to have a Plan B back burner and really quickly to address these things. At least say that we have discussed and within the framework of our board, what can we do? And then what are we going to need the executive order of the governor to be able to do? And is he going to listen to the executive, talk about an executive order that's talking about, 50 or 100 people? That's a small number of people when he's writing executive orders that encompass the entire state. So I throw that out there. I yield the floor to Ms. Winston.
Mr. Ware, thank you again, Mary Winston. I want to then second, I think we have inadvertently moved on to recommendations for agenda items for the next meeting. But before we go there, and honestly, agenda items that are going to come up in the work group, and we'll have some discussion from those work group items and updates as we move forward in trying to help this new class of potential licensees. Stuart has identified that for us that there is a temporary licensure component. Molly's going to be tasked with working out whatever rules we get dispensation for. The work group is going to participate and give her input to all of that, as well as RPM and any information they have from BOC, different conferences and so forth. So we have a lot of work that we do have from the background. I want to, if possible, definitely take more items, but I want to make sure Mike has finished his report.
Correct.
Because we have started a whole bunch of things that definitely need to be started. And I thank you all so much. Excellent board. And I appreciate each and every one of you. And we will be contacting you after this meeting. But I just want to make sure if someone else has something else they want to add for this, because I'm just redirecting us to say we are definitely on topic on the agenda items, because we're talking about recommendations and work in the process. And just to make sure, Mike, if you had anything, I wasn't sure if you were finished with your report. And I also want to say, any other information, please email us. Any other consideration, advisory.boards, the email, or give me a call. Advisory.boards goes to several folks, and we can get those things on work group agendas. And as we see, this has been a very successful platform. And hopefully we'll do a work group just like this, bring out all those ideas and see if we can formulate something and get Molly, thank you, Molly, to kind of get it all written out and working with our government relations folks to see what we can do. Thanks everyone for your input. And sorry, I think I hijacked it. I'm gonna hand it back over.
No worries. Mr. Mayor, just go ahead and finish your report. Thank you.
Chairman, board members, I think this is indicative of the very issues that we've been running across across the entire agency with all of the different programs that we have. I tell you, one thing that we're getting very good at is waking up in the morning and not having a plan, and then going to sleep and knowing that we've already gone through plans A, B, and C, and now we're working on plan D that same day. As I mentioned earlier, this is very fluid. We are learning as we're going. We're taking into consideration all the items and the comments and suggestions by the various industry groups and the licensees in order to formulate a plan that we think will work for the entire industry. I can tell you this, is that very comment that you have, Mr. Gaines, concerning a plan B for the practical, Molly's responsibility is to ensure that those issues are bubbling and continue to simmer, working with Stuart and trying to get suggestions and the work group that was mentioned. Those are the type of things that we need to hear so that we can make sure that we can begin to start working on plan B. If that's not working out, we'll go to plan C, but we have to do this because, you know, sad but true, but we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants here and trying to ensure that we're getting everybody covered. So I'm going to move on, if you don't mind, to the other items that we have, our strat plan. As you know, every 2 years, we go through a strategic plan process, and it is a very intense look about how we see ourselves, but more than anything else, the most important part is how our licensees see us. And we ask various questions in order to ensure that we can get the feedback from the state of Texas, from those that we license and regulate to ensure that we're moving in the right direction. This year was no different, other than we hit the coronavirus. So when I say it's not different, that in itself changed the way that we do things. As you're aware, we kind of go out through the state of Texas, we hold meetings, and we get some feedback from all of our licensees through the various days that we're out and meeting with folks. Well, we had our meeting scheduled, we were ready to get out, we were ready to hit the road, and then everything began to start shutting down. So we had to kind of change the way that we do things. And the other, our other Deputy Executive Director, David Gonzalez, who's on this call meeting right now, was tasked with heading that up and begin the process of doing the strat planning. So we did it internally and externally. We held virtual meetings. As you may be aware, we had a virtual meeting concerning feedback from our licensees, which was a very different way that we've ever done it in the past. But I believe it's successful. We got some good feedback. So we submitted that strat plan on June the 1st. And so that is out there now, and you can go to our website and find it under our strat planning, all of our agency reports. You'll find our strat plan that we've submitted to the legislature, and it's now out there. There's some things in there that we know that we want to improve upon, and there's some things that we think will help the agency and help our licensee base. And I can answer any questions on that if you'd like, or I can move on to our Sunset Commission. I don't see any hands up, so I'm gonna move on to our Sunset Commission. As you know, our Sunset Commission, we've been under Sunset now since June of 2019. So for almost a year now, we've been working with the Sunset Commission. They attended almost every single meeting that we had. I believe they're at some of the athletic trainer advisory board meetings. They've attended our commission meetings. They went out and they talked to license holders. They talked to various groups. They've talked to our employees. They went out to inspections. They even went out to a UFC sporting events over in Houston. They wanted to see how we do things. We went through a process of discussions with them on answering questions that they had. I mentioned intense earlier. The intensity for the Sunset Commission took it up a couple of notches because they were in every single piece of our business in our agency, which is what they're expected to do. They submitted the report. They published it on June the 4th. It is out there now. We had a response to the Sunset Commission, which was due last Thursday, the 18th, which we submitted. I would let you know that there are some very controversial items that have been put in Sunset Commission. But understand this is just the beginning of the process. We tell folks this all the time. We have just now started this process. The Sunset Commission put the report out there. We responded. There will be a lot of opportunity for our licensees to make comments. there will be an opportunity for them to be able to speak before the Sunset Commission, which is scheduled to meet on the 19th and 20th of August. They'll have the opportunity to be able to make comments on recommendations by the Sunset Commission. And then the Sunset Commission will have a vote on the 23rd or the 24th of September, depending on when they take it out. We think it's going to be 23rd, but it's going to be either the 23rd or the 24th of September. At that point in time, that recommendation would then go to the legislature, maybe some bills filed. But again, it's still a process. Our citizens, the licensees, still have the opportunity to be able to make comments and talk to the legislators concerning the Sunset Commission report. I would let everyone know that this is a report filed by the Sunset Commission. And we kind of take no position on it because this is not our report. This is the Sunset Commission report. And so while we understand some of the license holders will have some issues with the recommendations being made, we're simply having to follow through the process, and we're simply having to go with and make answer requests that are brought to us through the Sunset Commission. So it is also out on the our website, and you can go out and read it and take a look at it, and then understand that there's a lot of opportunity for changes to be made through this process. It's not finished till the governor signs a bill. That's when it ends. So I believe Ms. Webb had a question or comment.
I was just going to ask where we could find that report, and you said it's on the TDLR website.
It is. The Sunset Report is actually on our main website. So when you go to tdlr.texas.gov, then it is on that front page. You can find that. I was just informed that our response was not actually Thursday. It was scheduled for Thursday, but it's now been pushed to this Thursday, the 25th. So we will send our response on the 25th of this month. I'm sorry, in this week. But yes, if you go to our website, you can find the Sunset Commission report there also.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Arismendes from any of our board members? Comments or questions?
Daryl Gaines, I have one. Mr. Arismendes, I'm just asking, I haven't had a chance to look at it. Were there anything specific to our licensure within those that you said were, gosh, how did you word it? Well, that were of interest to us that might pique some interest to dive into it, or was it more based on just the organization, the TDLR itself?
There were recommendations to deregulate some current licenses and license holders that we have. There were some recommendations for consolidation. And there were other recommendations that had to do with our processes within the agency. But as it relates to athletic trainer licenses, there was nothing in the Sunset Commission report.
Thanks, sir.
Mr. Gaines, thank you for asking the same question that I was wondering. So I appreciate you going out there and doing that. Thank you, Mr. Arismendes, for that Cliff Notes response.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Arismendes before we move to item J?
Thank you for your time. I appreciate all your work.
Thank you, sir. So moving to item J, as Ms. Winston raised just a moment ago, we have discussed some items that we need to address either from a work group situation and indirectly as a board. But this is the item time for call for any other additional items that any board member would like to bring to be placed on an agenda for a future meeting, or be it addressed through a work group that hasn't already been mentioned. Yes, sir. I recognize Mr. Gaines.
I sent through an email several months ago back concerning my renewal, and I had some issues that I thought would need to be addressed, possibly through the board, to discuss the hoops and the difficulties that I had renewing. And I haven't necessarily got a completed response from that, or seen anywhere where we have addressed that through the board. I believe I even sent it to the advisory board email for potential agenda addition, to be put on. So, and I'd be glad to resubmit that as an opportunity to potentially look at that. But there were some steps that in my personal renewal process that I thought were lacking in the procedural situation. That, for example, that, if I'm writing a check, either personal or through my employer, there's actually not an invoice that can be printed off that specifically relates to there was not one that specifically related to my license and actually delayed my license being renewed because of lack of information, lack of coordination to simplify the process, because I didn't renew online, because I didn't renew by electronic transfer. There was a delay, and I just don't think that that's reasonable in this day and age. So I would like to, if I need, like I say again, if I need to resubmit my request for that, I'll be glad to do that, to have that, looked at and reviewed and potentially put on, the next agenda. And I'll release the floor. I see Ms. Winston is looking to address this. So please feel free, Mary. Straighten me out. I need some help.
Red, I'm not going to straighten you out, Mary Winston here. We did receive that request. You don't have to rescind. I do want to let everyone know, I'm going to repeat that this is our third meeting, and virtually. And because of it, we bifurcated, we cut down several of the items that we normally would have on in this meeting, because we weren't sure how everything was going to go. We have tested out our social media team, our website team, led by Michael Fickle, tested out several platforms, and this is the one that we did come up with, and it's been working very well. So sorry that was not on the agenda, but we needed to make sure the rules were on the agenda today, and everything is moved more smoothly than we thought. Not that we were anticipating a problem, but we always want to be ready for it, because life in general is kind of at the seat of our pants. If we think about it, we want to prepare as much for that as we can. So Red, I want to get those things addressed moving forward. This is another thing. So if you note, today we didn't have a licensing division report. We didn't have an education examination report. So some of those things, as we get better with this process, we'll report on. Red, we will look into, definitely, I'm acknowledging receipt. I'm so sorry that it wasn't on this item, this agenda, but it is because we were trying to make it as skinny as possible. And we're always looking to make the process better. We know that during our discussion of items for next time, we've identified that there are probably issues. And we know that Stuart and his team is going to look into any barriers that can occur for new graduating or renewing licensees. So that's one item that we're going to go into. We don't have education and examination on this meeting, but we've identified several things that we need to look at for a practical exam, so forth and so on. So Ray Pizarro, if he is not watching online, I'm sure he is, we'll give him a holler right after this meeting to know that he's on tap for that. Red will reach out to you personally about your issue, as well as seeing about that invoice situation with our software. We've talked for, ad nauseum for a while now that we have so many different softwares, but if your employer is paying and if you need an invoice, we don't want that to slow down your licensure. So any barriers there, we're going to make sure we go back into licensing and take a look at. And I believe, and I hope I'm not misspeaking, Deputy Executive Director, that as we move forward and we're more comfortable with this platform, that we can add in more members from the different divisions to address more things. We just knew we needed to get these rules done, and we did cut out several of our normal items that are on.
And that's exactly correct. Thanks for mentioning that, Mary. Is that we're still, as I mentioned, we're still trying to feel our way, even through this virtual meeting, the video conferencing that we're doing. As we become more comfortable and begin to start understanding how video conferencing works and bringing in folks, because one of the issues that we had, and even in our commission meeting, if you go back and take a look at it, was we had public comments, but there was a delay in bringing people on for public comments. We're trying to figure out how we can work through that. So we've kind of encountered some different issues here, but we'll work all through that, and we're hoping that by the time we have our next meeting, and if we're still doing video conferencing, then we can begin to start bringing in some other divisions to be able to make, to give their report so we can get those questions answered. But I appreciate that. But yes, Mr. Gaines, just so you know, we will address that and take a look at it and kind of move from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Winston. Thank you, Ms. Harris Mendez. Red, did you have something else?
This daggum muting and unmute is killing me. No, I just thank y'all. I never doubted that, and it wasn't. I just knew that this was the opportunity to bring that up and make sure that it does. I knew y'all would address it. I just thought we needed to put it out there for, you know, official whatever. But anyway, thank y'all very much. I know it wasn't ignored, and I know it wasn't thrown away and anything like that. I just wanted to make sure that we put it out there. So thank y'all again.
And rest assured, just because they saw your name didn't mean that they just put it to the back burner.
No, I don't believe that. But
Okay, board, any other items for that you want to put on the record for consideration or discussion at this point in time? Okay, hearing none. Item K is staff, probably Angelica, will be polling our board for our next meeting date, time, and location, and determining where we are in the in this pandemic timeframe and what we are able to do and best practices for maintaining our health. So that will be item K. Is any other items before I adjourn our meeting? Okay, hearing none, our meeting is now adjourned. It is straight up 10:59 on this Monday morning. I thank you for everyone that's attended our meeting and your continued contribution to this board and our in the world of athletic training. So I thank you, staff, for your time that you spent this morning with us, and fellow board, the time that you spend serving our association and our license holders. That goes without saying, but I want to make sure that it is stated today. So thank you very much. Our meeting is adjourned.